I am going to take a closer look at a letter from President Abraham Lincoln to General George B. McClellan on April 9, 1862. Lincoln opened with, "Your dispatches complaining that you are not properly sustained, while they do not offend me, do pain me very much." This is a tough opening for Lincoln, very critical of McClellan. In most of his letters to his generals, Lincoln starts out congratulatory, but in a sign of his growing frustration with McClellan, he starts out critical. To give you some background of the relationship between McClellan and Lincoln, in April of 1862, McClellan is engaged in his Peninsula campaign. McClellan's plan is to move by water down the Chesapeake and up the Rappahannock River and force General Johnston's Confederate army to race south to protect Richmond from the approaching Union army. Lincoln did not like this plan, according to historian James McPherson, because Lincoln believed in attacking the enemy's army rather than in maneuvering to capture places. Lincoln was also concerned that McClellan's plan would leave Washington, D.C. without adequate protection if the Confederate army moved on the Union capital. His concern is echoed in his letter when he writes, "After you left, I ascertained that less than 20,000 unorganized men without a single field battery were all you designed to be left for the defense of Washington." In turn, Lincoln, as commander-in-chief, decided to keep some parts of the Army of the Potomac to protect Washington. "My explicit order that Washington should, by the judgment of all the commanders of army corps, be left entirely secure had been neglected. It was precisely this that drove me to detain McDowell." He continued with his questioning of McClellan's decision-making by writing, "Do you really think I should permit the line from Richmond via Manassas Junction to this city be entirely open, except what resistance could be presented by less than 20,000 unorganized troops?" Lincoln was already wary of McClellan's Peninsula campaign, but now is questioning the decisions of McClellan in protecting the capital. This is not the only time Lincoln criticized one of his Union generals in a letter or telegram. He consistently questioned the decisions of his generals. Later in 1862, Lincoln called attention to McClellan's overcautiousness. He also counseled his newly appointed commander of the Army of the Potomac, General Joseph Hooker, in January of 1863, in saying, "But I think that during General Burnside's command of the army, you have taken counsel of your ambition and thwarted him as much as you could, in which you did a great wrong to the country and to a most meritorious and honorable brother officer." Also in that letter, Lincoln wrote, "The government will support you to the utmost of its ability, which is neither more nor less than it has done and will do for all commanders." I disagree that Lincoln adequately supported his generals, especially early in the war. I believe that until General Ulysses S. Grant proved himself as commander of the Union Army in 1864 and 1865, Lincoln questioned his generals too much and did not trust them enough to give them full control over military affairs. Even General Grant was not above questioning by Lincoln. In July of 1863, after the Union victory at Vicksburg, he wrote Grant saying, "I never had any faith except a general hope that you knew better than I. I feared it was a mistake. I now wish to make the personal acknowledgment that you were right and I was wrong." General McClellan bristled at this constant questioning by Lincoln and the Union brass when he expressed his own frustration. "If they will simply let me alone, I feel sure of success, but will they do it?" Obviously, after repeated failures by McClellan, Lincoln never let McClellan alone. These actions display a tendency by Lincoln to run military operations. Was he overstepping his authority as commander-in-chief by trying to dictate military strategy to his generals? Or did he just have bad generals who could not be trusted to act properly on their own? If it was just bad generals, isn't it Lincoln's responsibility to act as commander-in-chief to appoint the best generals to the highest ranks in the army? While McClellan was good at organizing the Army of the Potomac and beloved by his troops, he fell victim to his own hesitation to attack because he overestimated the number of enemy troops and underestimated his own forces. Lincoln wrote, when I telegraphed you on the 6th saying you had over 100,000 troops with you, you now say you will have but 85,000. When all en route to you shall have reached you, how can the discrepancy of 23,000 be accounted for? This was a constant point of discussion between Lincoln and McClellan. Lincoln, his troop numbers versus Confederate troop numbers. In the April letter, he also wrote to McClellan, imploring McClellan, "It is indispensable to you that you strike a blow. I am powerless to help this. You will do me the justice to remember I always insisted that going down the bay in search of a field instead of fighting at or near Manassas was only shifting and not surmounting a difficulty, that we would find the same enemy and the same or equal entrenchments at either place." Lincoln again stated his difference of opinion with McClellan on strategy. He ends with, "I beg to assure you that I have never written you or spoken to you in greater kindness of feeling than now, nor with a fuller purpose to sustain you, so far as in my most anxious judgment I consistently can. But you must act." In typical Lincoln fashion, after a letter full of questioning and criticism, he ended with a supporting and kind-hearted line to McClellan. But again, Lincoln ends with a request for McClellan to once again attack. Please attack the Confederates. Lincoln's letter displays his own self-confidence in his military abilities, but also displayed his lack of trust in McClellan as a commander. In the letter, Lincoln questioned his decision-making, his strategy, and in subtle ways, his willingness to fight the Confederates. It wasn't until later in the war when Lincoln, among others in his government, wondered whether or not McClellan's unwillingness to directly attack the enemy was somewhat politically motivated. Because in 1864, McClellan ran for president against Lincoln as the Democratic Party nominee. We have no proof that McClellan ever didn't attack because of anything other than military reasons. But this letter shows the ever-growing divide between Lincoln and McClellan, which led to McClellan's dismissal as Union commander later in 1862.